Hey friends, so we are back in Luke chapter 12 today, and this chapter is one of my favorites because it's very, very practical, but also challenging in a way. Jesus is going to talk about fear, and he's going to talk about like what we actually need to be afraid of. He's going to talk about money and trusting God and being ready for when he returns. And my favorite part is when he talks about living with eternal perspective. So if you've ever struggled with anxiety or approval or control, me, this chapter is for all of us. So the first thing that Jesus talks about is the leaven of the Pharisee, and he starts with a warning. He says, "Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees," which basically means hypocrisy. You see, in Jewish culture, leaven or yeast symbolized something that spreads quickly, is small, but it spreads quickly and powerfully. The Pharisees were, of course, religious leaders, respected, but Jesus exposes their influence, and he says that they're corrupted, from the inside out. Hypocrisy means living one way outwardly, but being totally different on the inside. And so what Jesus is saying is that, what's hidden is going to be revealed. Isn't that the truth? I mean, we see it again and again. God sees the real you, not just who you present on the outside. And that's pretty convicting, right? That we have to live real, authentic lives because that's what he sees. That's what's true. We have a tendency, or we live in a world that is so not authentic. And that's what's difficult, especially I think today. So Jesus says, something somewhat surprising. He says, after that, he says, "Don't fear those who kill the body, fear those who have authority over your soul." What does that mean? Jesus isn't telling us to live in terror of God. He's calling us to the right perspective. People affect your lives temporarily sometimes. And, we shouldn't fear people. Okay, yeah, they can affect your life. Yeah, you might have a boss that's a jerk. Yeah, you might have a friend that's jealous or wouldn't be really a friend, but or someone who's trying to harm you or hurt you or doesn't even like you. And the truth of the matter is that yes, they can affect your life. These things definitely affect your life, but it's temporary. But God, he holds an eternal authority. So right after that, Jesus says, "You are worth more than so many sparrows." I love that. There's two things happening here. God is holy and powerful, but he's also loving and attentive. And Jesus promises that when we face pressure or persecution, that the Holy Spirit is going to give us words to speak. That God is not only over us, but he is with us and he's in us and he's working things for us. We don't have to live for people's approval or in fear of people. We live in awe of God and trust how deeply he cares for us. Then we move on to, in the next part, the rich fool. And someone asks Jesus to settle this inheritance dispute. And Jesus responds with a parable about a rich man who stores up wealth for himself. During that time, wealth was seen as, God's favor. But Jesus challenges that assumption, He says, the rich man says, "I will store up, I'll sit by, relax, I'm going to enjoy life, it's going to be great." But he leaves God out of the picture. And so this connects to a major biblical theme, right? He's basically, life is more than material possessions. What he's saying is this rich man, okay, yeah, it may seem like he has favor, but actually he's just loaded up with idolatry. He places his ultimate trust in something other than God. And Jesus says that, the very night your life will be demanded from you. You can have everything and still miss what matters the most. True life is found in God, right? Not in what we have. And so then the next part kind of parallels the Sermon on the Mount when he's talking about worry. And it's very comforting. It's also very convicting, I think. Jesus says, don't worry about your life. Not so easy, right? Again, God provides the manna, right? He is not a God of scarcity. He is a God of abundance. God feeds the birds. He clothes, the flowers, the lilies of the field. God is a faithful provider. Worry reveals where our trust is lacking. Jesus isn't ignoring real needs. He knows our needs. But our focus has to be on him and how he is a provider, not on our needs. I think that's the trick, right? It's talk about conviction. I mean, I try not to worry. I know God is faithful. Man, keeping my focus on him and his faithfulness, I think needs to be the key, which I don't know if I'm that good at. It says to seek his kingdom and all these things will be added to us. The eternal perspective. Just keep seeking this upside down crazy kingdom that he calls us to. God's going to provide. He actively sustains and provides. In fact, I can look back, and this is the crazy part, right? I can look back last year, the year before. I can't even remember half the things I worried about. He came through. He provides. He figured it out. He loves us. And we don't have to carry everything. God knows that we need what we need. We just have to seek him first. In the next section, verse 35 through 48, Jesus sort of shifts things and he talks about being ready and watchful for, some end time talk here. The servants in this part were expected to be ready for their master's return, which could come at any time. Sometimes it was unexpected, right? Everything had to be ready. And Jesus is pointing to his future return. We don't know when, but we're called to live ready, expectant. And he says, to whom much is given, much will be required. We are to be good stewards of the time, the talent, the money that we've been given. We are to be accountable to him. And we are to have an eternal perspective, knowing that we're not promised tomorrow, but we are promised forever. And, and we want others to have part of that as well. Our life, your life matters, right? And how we live has eternal significance. People are watching. We're supposed to be salt and light. And then Jesus says something very surprising. He says, I didn't come to bring peace, but division, or some translations say the sword. Again, let's rewind or review this. That is, Jesus, if you're not for him, you're against him. We have to respond to him. Even within families, people are going to choose differently. Following Jesus isn't comfortable. It's true. Following Jesus isn't comfortable. It's true. Jesus rebukes the crowd for recognizing signs, but they're not seeing the spiritual reality of what is real and what is true. Pay attention to what God is doing. Don't miss the truth because you're distracted by everything else. My goodness gracious, is that not totally convicting? What's distracting you today? And what's true? That doesn't mean we avoid the news and the weather and the things of the world, but if it's a distraction, if scrolling is a distraction, if worry is a distraction from what is true, then we have a problem. We're supposed to live authentically, not afraid, to fear God, but not people. We're supposed to trust him with our needs and let go of all the materialism and stay ready for eternity. We don't have to have everything figured out. But the next step is to trust God a little bit more, to worry a little bit less, to keep our eyes on what really matters, eternity. Eternity. In the scope of eternity, does this matter? Not usually. In the scope of eternity, salvation matters. The salvation of your people, the salvation of those who you love. And so how we live is what's going to catch their attention the most, I promise.